They thought they had scammed me clean, counting on my age, my grief, and my silence. But the real trap had been set years before, and when the truth surfaced, that everything belonged to the one granddaughter they ignored, the whole family was there to watch themselves crumble. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. My name is Leonard Hayes. I am 72, a retired machinist, and a grandfather of 4. For most of my life, I believed in family loyalty like it was scripture. I worked 39 years at the same factory, building turbine parts until my hands were leather and my back bent like an old pipe. My wife, Ruth, and I saved carefully. We built a house out in a quiet neighborhood, raised 2 children, and thought we'd set an example about working hard and standing tall. But Ruth passed 5 years ago, and when she did, I became an open target. My son David had always been ambitious in words, never in deeds. His wife, Carla, sharpened that weakness into cruelty. She had a way of making every family gathering a stage where David could flaunt his new ideas while she reminded me I was lucky to be included. My daughter Claire wasn't any better. She'd once been gentle, but after marrying Todd, a man who wore Italian shoes and carried debt like jewelry, she learned to sneer at the life her mother and I had built. I had 4 grandchildren. Out of them, only Sophie ever knocked on my door without her hand out. She was 19, still in college, always with ink stains on her fingers from sketching. She'd bring me lemon muffins she baked herself and sit with me for hours. She once told me, "Grandpa, you're the only person who listens without checking your phone." Her cousins, on the other hand, David's boys and Claire's daughter, saw me only as a holiday obligation. I overheard one of them once say, "Just smile at him, he always hands out $20 bills." That told me all I needed to know. The scams began small. They always do. One evening, the phone rang while I was half asleep in my chair. Claire's voice came through in a rush. "Dad, Todd's business deal hit a snag. If we don't cover payroll, the bank will pull everything. It's just bad timing. If we can get $15,000 by Friday, everything will bounce back." I barely hesitated. Todd was loud and flashy, but I wanted to believe my daughter still had good judgment. I wired the money the next morning. She texted a thank you later that day, but it read more like a receipt than gratitude. "Got it. Lifesaver." A month later, David knocked on my door. He didn't even bother calling first. Carla was with him, standing just behind like a lawyer monitoring a witness. "Dad, it's for medical bills," David said, eyes darting everywhere but mine. "You wouldn't let your own grandson suffer, would you?" Carla folded her arms. Her tone was flat, cutting. "Honestly, you should be grateful you're still useful." That one stung, but I said nothing. I wrote the check. It didn't stop there. By spring, Claire asked for just a little help covering their property taxes. "You've got the savings, Dad," she said. "And think of it this way, Todd and I will inherit the house anyway, so really, you're investing in your own legacy." I swallowed my pride and sent another $10,000. In summer, David showed up again. This time it was about a new car. He claimed it was for the kids, something safe, something reliable. Carla chimed in, "And besides, your old truck's falling apart. You'd understand wanting better for your grandkids, wouldn't you?" I signed the transfer. Weeks later, I saw David pull up in a brand new luxury SUV, leather seats and all. My grandson never even sat in the driver's seat. The thanks grew thinner, replaced by expectation. Claire once sighed when I didn't answer her call right away. "Dad, if you're not going to pick up when I need you, what's the point of keeping a phone?" At David's house, Carla began directing me around like staff. "Bring that casserole dish in here, Leonard. Careful, don't scratch the counter. We just had it redone, thanks to your help. And then came Thanksgiving. Todd raised his glass with a smirk that made my skin crawl. Here's to our silent investor, Dad Hayes, keeping us all afloat. The table erupted in laughter. Even David chuckled, as though the joke wasn't aimed like a dagger at me. Claire giggled and clinked her glass against Todd's. Everyone laughed, except Sophie. She sat with her hands in her lap, her smile gone, and excused herself quietly. I watched her slip down the hallway, unnoticed by the others. Later that night, I carried plates into the kitchen. The laughter from the dining room still rang in my ears. Carla brushed past me, her perfume sharp, her words sharper. Try not to drop anything, okay? These dishes cost more than your pension. When David entered, she smiled sweetly and cooed, honey, wasn't dinner wonderful? But the words she'd hissed at me stayed, burning like acid. It all came to a head one humid July evening. Claire and Todd had invited me over under the guise of a family discussion. That phrase should have tipped me off. When I arrived, they didn't even greet me properly. Todd was sprawled on the couch, shoes off, sipping whiskey like he owned the place. Claire tapped her phone, barely glancing up. David and Carla were already there, sitting across the room. Dad, Claire started briskly, we've been talking. You can't keep managing all these accounts by yourself. It's too much responsibility at your age. Todd smirked, adding, we've decided it's best if we just consolidate. You sign over power of attorney, and we'll handle everything. Cleaner, simpler. Safer. David nodded. It's really for your own good. You don't want to make mistakes with online banking, Dad. One wrong click and your whole pension could vanish. Carla leaned forward, her tone dripping with sugar but her eyes hard. Besides, you won't even notice the difference. We'll take care of the bills, the taxes. You can just relax. I stared at them, my hands gripping the arm of the chair. Relax, I repeated slowly. You want me to sign over everything I worked for? Hand it all to you like pocket change? Claire finally looked up, irritated. Oh, don't make it sound so dramatic. You've had your time, Dad. You can't hang on forever. We're the future now. Todd chuckled, swirling the ice in his glass. Think of it as retirement, Hayes. We'll keep the ship steady while you enjoy what's left of the ride. Carla muttered under her breath, but loud enough for me to hear, assuming he doesn't forget where he put his checkbook again. Something snapped inside me. My chest ached, not from age, but from rage. For a moment, though, as I looked at their smug faces, a memory cut through the fury. Ruth's laughter echoed in my mind, clear as a bell, from a night 30 years ago. We'd been sitting on the back porch, watching fireworks over the lake. Claire was 10, David 8. They had sparklers in their hands, eyes bright, cheeks glowing. Promise me, Ruth had whispered, her hand warm in mine, that no matter what, you'll protect them. Even from themselves. I had promised. God help me, I had promised. Now here they were, grown adults, circling me like vultures, trying to strip me of everything Ruth and I had built. How had we gone from sparklers and laughter to this room reeking of whiskey, entitlement, and greed? Claire's voice yanked me back to the present. Dad, stop staring like that. Just sign the papers Todd drew up. We'll take care of the rest. Todd slid a folder across the coffee table with one finger, smirking like a banker sealing a deal. I didn't touch it. Instead, I rose slowly, every joint stiff but my spine straighter than it had been in years. My voice was low, deliberate. You call this taking care of me? I asked. You call this family? You stand in front of me, the man who fed you, clothed you, built the roof over your heads, and tell me I should just hand it all over because you're tired of waiting? David's face hardened. Don't turn this into some melodrama, Dad. It's practical. We deserve. Deserve? My voice cracked like a whip. You deserve nothing. Nothing but shame for what you've become. Carla rolled her eyes and muttered, he's losing it again. But I wasn't losing it. I was seeing clearer than ever before. That night, I walked out without touching their papers. I left their laughter and their mocking words behind, but the fury stayed with me like a second heartbeat. Because in that moment, I finally knew, the time for patience was over. I drove home in silence, the night pressing against the windshield like a weight. The folder Todd had shoved across the table replayed in my mind, thick paper, black ink, lines waiting for my signature as if I were nothing more than a pen with a pulse. I pulled into my driveway, killed the engine, and just sat there in the dark. The cicadas screamed in the trees. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, but not from weakness. No, this was something else. Something I hadn't felt in years. Ruth's voice echoed again. Protect them, even from themselves. I had tried. God knows I had tried. But how do you protect children who look at their father and see only a wallet? How do you love someone who laughs while stealing the roof from over your head? The porch light flickered on automatically. I stared at it, thinking of all the nights Ruth and I had sat under that glow, waiting for Claire or David to come home from dates, worrying like parents do. I remembered hugging them when they stumbled in late, too young to understand how much we feared losing them. And now they wanted to bury me alive in legal documents, strip me of my name, my work, my independence, all so they could gorge themselves sooner. The thought hardened inside me like cement. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just greed. This was a crime against everything Ruth and I had built together, everything I had sacrificed for. And if I let it go on, then I would be the fool, not them. For years I'd convinced myself patience was love. That turning the other cheek was strength. But what if strength meant something different now? What if strength meant drawing the line so deep in the earth that they could never cross it again? I stepped out of the truck and walked slowly to the house, the old boards creaking under my boots. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish, Ruth's favorite. On the hallway table, her photograph caught the porch light, her smile frozen in a moment when we still believed family meant protection, not plunder. I kept my promise, I whispered to her picture. I protected them long enough. Now I'll protect what's left of us. And as I stood there in the quiet house, a single, steady truth formed inside me. They thought they were about to inherit everything. But I was still alive. And as long as I was alive, I would decide what was right, and what they deserved. I couldn't sleep that night. The clock ticked on the dresser, but the sound was lost under the hum of my thoughts. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that folder sliding across Todd's table, his smirk daring me to sign away my life. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Ruth and I used to play cards long after the kids went to bed. A single lamp lit the room, casting everything else into shadow. It felt fitting. The first thought that came was almost tender, they're still my children. I could hear Ruth in my head, asking me to forgive. To be patient, to understand. Claire had once crawled into my lap after scraping her knee, begging me not to let her brother tease her. David had once fallen asleep on my shoulder after a Little League game, still in his dusty uniform. I had been their shield once. But those images cracked when I remembered Claire's cold voice, "You've had your time, Dad. You can't hang on forever." Or Carla's whisper in the kitchen, "Try not to drop anything, okay? These dishes cost more than your pension." Love had become a leash. Forgiveness had become an excuse. And patience had made me their servant. I stood and walked into Ruth's old study, where she'd kept her recipe books and photo albums. The room smelled faintly of her perfume, and for a moment, I almost faltered. But then I pulled open the bottom drawer of her desk and laid the albums out in front of me. One by one, I turned the pages. Claire in pigtails, blowing out birthday candles. David grinning with missing front teeth. Sophie as a toddler, clinging to my pant leg. Her cousins, the other grandchildren, barely in these pictures. They had always been too busy, too distracted, too entitled even as children. Sophie had been different from the start, always tugging at my hand, always drawing me pictures, always saying thank you without being told. I lingered on her photos longer than the rest. That was when the decision hardened in me. I couldn't keep treating all of them the same. Blood wasn't enough. Shared memories weren't enough. If Ruth's promise meant anything now, it was this: protect the good, cut away the rot. I went back to the kitchen table and pulled out a notepad. My handwriting was shaky at first, but it steadied as I wrote. Stop the bleeding. No more checks. No more loans. Make them reveal themselves. Let them push further, show their true colors where everyone can see. Leave something worth remembering, but not for them. For Sophie. My chest felt tight, but not from fear. It was the weight of finally choosing. For years I had told myself love meant giving without question. Tonight I saw the truth: sometimes love means saying no so loudly it shakes the rafters. The house was silent. Outside, the neighborhood slept. Inside, the decision was made. When morning came, I put the mask back on, the patient, pliant father they thought they could manage. I'd let them laugh, let them insult, let them plan. But I wouldn't stop writing in this notebook. I wouldn't stop keeping score. Because the time for patience was over. And when the day came, they wouldn't just lose my money. They'd lose the illusion that they ever truly knew me. The following weeks, I played my part. At breakfast with David and Carla, I feigned confusion when they bragged about the new SUV. Must have been expensive, I said, my tone soft, almost admiring. You're sure you can keep up the payments? David chuckled, waving a dismissive hand. Don't worry, Dad. We'll manage. You've always bailed us out before. Carla leaned in, her perfume sharp, her words sharper. That's what family's for, isn't it? Besides, you wouldn't want people thinking you'd abandoned your own grandchildren. I smiled faintly, hiding the fire in my chest. Keep talking, I thought. Every word is a nail in your own coffin. With Claire and Todd, it was easier. Todd loved to brag, loved an audience. I asked him one evening, as we sat on their deck with beers, so, what happens if this new project of yours tanks? He laughed, slapping the arm of his chair. That's why we've got you, Hayes. Our silent partner. You'll never let us sink. Claire giggled and kissed him on the cheek. She didn't even notice the way my jaw tightened, or maybe she didn't care. But I noticed something else: the way Sophie, sitting off to the side with a sketchbook on her knees, looked down at her drawing. Her pencil stilled. Her eyes narrowed. She heard every word. That was when I knew my tactic was working. They thought I was harmless, pliable, too tired to resist. But Sophie knew better. And soon, everyone would. I began to set traps, quiet ones, made of words instead of wires. At a Sunday dinner, I mentioned, almost casually, I've been thinking of selling the lake cabin. Too much upkeep for me alone. Todd's fork clattered against his plate. What? No, don't be ridiculous. That place is a gold mine. You can't sell it. It's ours. He caught himself too late, his eyes flicking to Claire. Ours? I asked softly, my gaze steady. Claire's cheeks flushed. He meant, it's family property. We all share it. I said nothing, just nodded and cut another piece of meatloaf. Silence pressed down on the table like a heavy hand. Another time, at David's house, I pulled out an envelope of old receipts. I was going through some papers, I said mildly. Did you know I've been covering part of your mortgage all these years? Strange thing. Feels like I've already bought this house once. David's face went pale. Carla tried to laugh it off, but her voice trembled. Well, you chose to do that. Don't make it sound like charity. I tucked the envelope back into my jacket. Of course. Just an observation. Each conversation was a skirmish, and in every skirmish, they gave me more ammunition. Their greed spilled out, careless and unguarded, while I stood steady, collecting proof. The truth was my weapon, and I carried it with the certainty of a soldier shouldering his rifle. I had lived long enough to know that lies collapse under their own weight, all you have to do is give them room. The more they demanded, the more silent I became. The more they mocked, the calmer I smiled. To them, it looked like weakness. To me, it was patience honed into steel. And in the quiet of my own home, I sharpened the plan. Let them insult me in public. Let them humiliate themselves in front of others. Let them reveal exactly what they are, so that when the moment came, there would be no defense, no way back. Because I wasn't just their father anymore. I was their reckoning. I knew words alone wouldn't be enough. My children were practiced liars, skilled at twisting a story until sympathy bent in their direction. If it came down to my word against theirs, I'd lose in their eyes before the fight even started. So I began to prepare. One Saturday morning, I drove to a small electronics store 2 towns over. The clerk barely looked at me as I bought a handful of discrete devices, a pen with a hidden microphone, a smoke detector camera, even a set of glasses with a recording function. I paid in cash, no questions asked. Back home, I took my time. I installed one device in the dining room chandelier where Claire always liked to hold court. Another in the living room where David liked to stretch his legs and complain about how hard life was. The pen stayed in my pocket for conversations I couldn't predict. Each click, each adjustment, steadied me. I wasn't sneaking. I wasn't plotting some cheap trick. I was preserving the truth, their words, their entitlement, their greed, the way a man might preserve evidence of a crime. Because that's exactly what this was. At night, I sat at the kitchen table with Ruth's old notepad, sketching scenarios like battle plans. What if they tried to corner me alone again? Smile, nod, let them talk. Keep the pen rolling. What if they mock me in front of others? Don't rise. Let them reveal themselves. Every insult is another nail. What if they demanded signatures, papers, accounts? Stall. Pretend confusion. Record the pressure. Make them show their true intent. And the big one, what if I chose the ground of confrontation myself? That thought gave me pause. For weeks, I'd been reacting. But maybe it was time I chose the stage. A family dinner. A holiday gathering. Somewhere Sophie would be present, but also neighbors or extended family, witnesses who couldn't be dismissed. I wrote in big block letters across the page. Confrontation. Public. Documented. The more I planned, the calmer I became. It wasn't anger anymore, it was purpose. They had called me weak, confused, old. Let them. The truth was a fortress, and I was inside it. I walked through the house, testing every camera angle, every microphone. I imagined the moment, Todd raising a glass, David asking for money, Carla making one of her barbed comments, Claire rolling her eyes. I saw it all, and I saw their words captured, permanent, undeniable. When Ruth's photo caught my eye on the mantel, I stopped. Her smile was gentle, the kind that once soothed every storm. I'm not doing this out of hate, I whispered. I'm doing it because you asked me to protect them. And sometimes the only protection left is the truth they can't escape. The plan was set. They thought I was still the quiet father, pliable and harmless. But I was done playing their game. This time, the game would be mine, and every piece on the board was already moving in my favor. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Claire insisted on hosting a Sunday dinner, just family. Her words had the same clipped sharpness they always did, but this time, I heard the eagerness underneath, like a wolf inviting sheep to supper. I arrived early, carrying a bottle of wine Ruth had loved. Sophie was already there, setting the table. She gave me a small smile, the kind that told me she knew why I was here, why I had come at all. I patted her shoulder, slipping the pen into my shirt pocket. The evening unfolded like a performance I'd already rehearsed. Todd dominated the head of the table, boasting about business opportunities. Carla bragged about how expensive their new furniture was. Claire laughed too loudly at Todd's jokes, while David leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, the posture of a man who thought the world owed him comfort. Finally, the mask slipped. "Dad," Claire said, her tone rehearsed, "we all agree it's time to make things easier for you. No more bills, no more confusion. If you sign over your finances, we'll take care of everything. It's the responsible thing to do." David chimed in. "You're lucky, you know. Most parents don't have kids willing to handle this kind of stuff. You should be grateful we're even offering." Carla laughed, soft but sharp. "Exactly. Nobody wants to see you flounder. Better to hand the reins to people who know what they're doing." Todd raised his glass, grinning. "To Dad Hayes, our silent partner. Soon to be retired from everything but breathing." The table erupted in laughter. Except Sophie. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth, her face tight with shame. That was the moment. I set my wine glass down gently, the sound louder than their laughter when it hit the table. "Silent partner," I repeated. My voice was calm, but it cut through the room. "Is that what you call me?" The room went quiet, the way a room does when a storm changes direction. I looked at each of them. "You've called me weak. You've called me confused. You've laughed while holding out your hands. And all the while, you've mistaken my patience for blindness." David smirked, but his eyes flickered. "Dad, don't be dramatic." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small speaker. With a single press of a button, the dining room filled with their own voices. Claire's hiss, "You've had your time, Dad. You can't hang on forever." Carla's sneer, "Honestly, you should be grateful you're still useful." Todd's laugh, "That's why we've got you, Hayes. Our silent partner." Their faces drained of color. Claire shot up from her chair. "Where did you?" I raised a hand. "Sit down." She froze. "I've spent months listening. Watching. Recording. While you mocked me, while you schemed, while you treated me like a wallet you could shake until coins fell out. And I let you, because I wanted to see how far you'd go." Sophie's eyes widened, but not with fear, with relief. I leaned forward, my voice steady, iron in every word. "This is how far. Planning to strip me of everything, planning to bury me under papers I don't need, because you thought old age meant weakness." Todd sputtered, "You can't use that against us." "I don't need to," I cut in. "You've already used it against yourselves. Every word is yours. Every insult, every plan. And now, you'll never escape it. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of Sophie's breath. She was smiling now, small, but certain. I pushed back my chair. From this day forward, there are no more checks. No more rescues. No more pretending that greed is family. The truth is out, and you'll live with it. And when you wonder why your names are missing from everything Ruth and I built, you'll remember tonight. I looked at Sophie. Come on, sweetheart. She stood with me, her hand slipping into mine. As we walked out, I heard Claire's chair scrape the floor, David cursing under his breath, Todd muttering like a cornered animal. But I didn't turn back. The recording was still playing behind me, their own voices echoing through the dining room like ghosts they'd never escape. For once, I didn't feel like the quiet, pliant father. I felt like Ruth's husband again. And I felt like Sophie's protector. Because the truth had spoken, and the fight was over. 3 days after that dinner, they came to my house. Not one at a time, all of them, minus Sophie. Todd's car pulled up first, David's SUV right behind. Claire was already marching across the lawn before the engines even cut off, her heels stabbing the ground like nails. I was on the porch, repairing a loose railing, when they surrounded me. Claire's voice was sharp, brittle. Dad, what you did the other night was illegal. Recording us without permission. Broadcasting it. That's grounds for a lawsuit. David crossed his arms, trying to look taller than he was. You've embarrassed us in front of the family, ruined our reputations. If you don't fix this, we'll take you to court. We'll have you declared incompetent. Carla, her arms folded like a queen on her throne, smirked. Honestly, it'd be easy. You're old, forgetful. We could get a doctor to sign off on it. Once that happens, you don't control anything. Not your house, not your accounts. Nothing. Todd stepped forward last, his smile oily, rehearsed. Here's the deal, Hayes. You hand over those recordings, you sign the papers we drew up, and we'll let this go quietly. Otherwise, he tapped his temple, his eyes glinting. Otherwise, we bury you in lawsuits until you don't have a penny left. I let them finish, let their venom spill onto the porch where Ruth and I once sat with lemonade, watching Sophie chase fireflies. For a moment, the memory hurt, the sweetness of it against the bitterness in front of me. Then I set down my hammer and looked at each of them. You want to sue me? My voice was calm, deliberate. Do it. You want to drag me into court, declare me incompetent? Be my guest. Because all that will do is give a judge the pleasure of hearing your words played back again and again. Every insult, every scheme, every plan to strip me bare. David's face tightened. Claire's mouth opened, then shut. I took a step closer, my eyes locked on Todd. And as for you, don't think I don't know what this is really about. You've been circling my house like a vulture since Ruth died. You want these walls, this land. But let me be clear, you will never touch this home. Not while I'm breathing. Not after I'm gone. Carla scoffed. You're bluffing. I smiled, faint but steady. Am I? Or is that what you tell yourself so you can sleep at night? The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the sound of the wind through the trees. For the first time, I saw doubt in their eyes. Real doubt. Finally, Claire hissed, "You'll regret this." "No," I said, picking up my hammer again. "The only regret in this family belongs to me, that I ever let it get this far." They left in a storm of slamming car doors and screeching tires, but I didn't watch them go. I just stood on the porch, steady as the house I'd built with my own hands, and whispered to Ruth's memory. They're not fighting me. They're fighting the truth. And the truth doesn't lose. The threats weren't idle. A week later, a thick envelope arrived in the mail, legal documents stamped with my name across the top. Claire and David had filed a petition to declare me mentally unfit to manage my affairs. Todd and Carla were listed as supporting witnesses. For a long while I just stood at the kitchen counter, the papers trembling in my hands. This was no longer whispers at dinner tables or barbed jokes over wine. This was war in daylight, sharpened into official ink and signatures. I sat down, staring at Ruth's old reading glasses still folded neatly on the counter, and whispered, "Well, sweetheart, looks like they finally decided to make it official." That evening, Sophie came over. She found me at the kitchen table, the documents spread out like a map of betrayal. She picked them up, her eyes scanning quickly, her jaw tightening. "They're really doing this," she said flatly. I nodded. "They think they can erase me with a few pieces of paper. They don't realize the ink runs both ways." She pulled out a chair, sitting across from me, her posture firm despite the weight of it all. "Then we fight. And you're not doing it alone." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I'd been preparing myself to stand against them by myself, the way I always had. But looking at Sophie, her eyes steady and her hands already reaching for a notepad, I felt something I hadn't in years: relief. "They'll paint me as senile," I muttered. "Confused. Easy to manipulate. That's the story they'll sell." Sophie leaned forward. "Then we show the truth. Every recording. Every insult. Every conversation you caught on tape. And Grandpa, you're not the confused one. They are. Confused enough to think greed is love." Her words hit me harder than any insult my children had ever thrown. She was right. The evidence wasn't just proof, it was a mirror. And soon, the whole world would see them in it. That night, we turned the dining table into a war room. Sophie with her laptop, me with Ruth's old notepad. She organized the recordings by date, labeling each one with a short summary: payroll scam, medical bills lie, lake cabin claim, Thanksgiving insults, power of attorney push, porch threats. "Let them try to argue you're incompetent," Sophie said, her voice sharp with purpose. "Because every one of these recordings shows exactly who's been manipulating who." I watched her, a 19-year-old who should have been out with friends or sketching in the park, now turning into my fiercest ally. Her cousins would never have done this. They'd never have given me an ounce of their time without expecting money in return. "Grandpa," she said softly, breaking my thoughts. "You know why I'm doing this?" "Because you're good," I said. She shook her head. "Because you believed in me first. Nobody else ever did. You kept showing up. Now it's my turn." I swallowed hard, my throat burning. For years I'd wondered if Ruth's promise, protect them, even from themselves, had been a curse. But sitting there with Sophie, I realized it wasn't about all of them. It was about protecting the one who deserved it. When Sophie finally left that night, the evidence neatly packed into folders, I stood at the window watching her car disappear down the street. The house was quiet again, but not with despair. This silence was different, the silence of preparation before battle. My children wanted a courtroom. They'd get one. And when the judge heard their voices played back, when the world saw what they really were, they wouldn't just lose their case. They'd lose the last mask they had left. I turned off the light, whispering into the dark, "The truth doesn't need my strength anymore. It has Sophie's. And together, that's more than enough." The courthouse smelled of polished wood and nerves. I hadn't stepped into one since I signed the papers for Ruth's will, and even then it had been a quiet, dignified process. This was different. Claire and David were already seated when Sophie and I walked in. Claire's suit was too sharp, her smile too wide, the grin of someone who thought they'd already won. David sat stiff, his jaw clenched, Carla whispering in his ear. Todd lounged behind them, oozing smugness like a man sure he was the smartest in the room. Sophie guided me to our seats, her hand steady on my arm. "Remember," she whispered, "you don't need to say much. Just let their words speak for themselves." The judge entered, the shuffle of robes silencing the room. Papers shuffled, pleasantries exchanged, but I barely heard any of it. My eyes stayed on my children. I searched their faces for even a flicker of guilt, of hesitation. There was none. Only hunger. Claire's lawyer rose first. His words were polished, rehearsed. "Mr. Hayes is 72. His late wife handled most of their affairs. Since her passing, his children have witnessed repeated confusion, forgetfulness, and financial mismanagement. It is in his best interest, and the family's, that control be transferred." I felt Sophie's grip tighten on my hand. "Wait for it," she whispered. Then it was my turn. Or rather, Sophie's. She stood, young but unwavering, a folder clutched in her hands. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady, "my grandfather is not confused. He is not incompetent. He is being targeted by his own family. And I can prove it." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Proceed." Sophie pressed play on the small speaker we'd brought. Claire's voice filled the courtroom, cold and sharp. "You've had your time, Dad. You can't hang on forever." Carla's sneer followed, "Honestly, you should be grateful you're still useful." Then Todd's mocking toast, "That's why we've got you, Hayes. Our silent partner." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even the judge's face shifted. Claire shot up, shouting, "That's out of context." Sophie didn't flinch. "There's more," she said, her voice cutting through Claire's protest. She pressed another button. David's voice, flat and hard, "Will have you declared incompetent. Once that happens, you don't control anything. Not your house, not your accounts. Nothing." And then Todd again, smug and vicious, "Otherwise we bury you in lawsuits until you don't have a penny left." The room went still. The words hung heavy, undeniable. I looked at my children. Claire's face had drained of color. David shifted, glancing at the floor. Carla's smirk had collapsed. Even Todd leaned back in his chair, eyes darting. For the first time, I didn't see them as victors circling prey. I saw them as what they really were, small, desperate, cornered by their own arrogance. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "I've heard enough." Claire tried again, her voice breaking. "Dad, you can't let Sophie twist this. You know we only wanted what's best." "Enough," I said. My voice surprised even me, steady, cold, final. "You wanted what was best for yourselves. You've proven that. Over and over again." I turned slightly, my eyes finding Sophie. She was watching me, her chin lifted, her face full of pride. And in that moment, I didn't feel like a victim fighting for scraps of dignity. I felt like Ruth's husband again. Like the father I used to be. Like the grandfather Sophie deserved. The judge's gavel came down with a sharp crack. Petition denied. Case dismissed. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. Claire collapsed into her chair. David muttered something I couldn't hear. Todd's jaw tightened, but for once, he said nothing. I stood slowly, Sophie steadying me. The weight that had been crushing me for years seemed lighter. Not gone, it would never be gone, but lifted enough to breathe. As we walked out, Sophie whispered, "You did it, Grandpa." "No," I said softly. "We did it. Behind us, the courtroom doors closed, sealing the echo of their voices inside, a permanent record of what they had become. And for the first time in years, I stepped into the sunlight without feeling their shadows chasing me. The weeks after the hearing were quieter than I expected. No more phone calls at odd hours, no envelopes demanding money, no smug dinners where I was paraded like a prize bull. Claire and David vanished into their own messes, and Todd and Carla were suddenly too busy to bother me. At first, the silence felt strange. I would catch myself waiting for the phone to ring, bracing for another demand that never came. But soon, the quiet settled into something softer. Something like peace. Sophie started coming by more often. Sometimes with groceries, sometimes just with her sketchbook. She'd sit at the kitchen table while I fixed us coffee, her pencil scratching across paper while I told her stories about Ruth, about the factory, about the years when her father and aunt were still children and the world seemed simpler. One evening, she showed me what she'd been working on, a drawing of the lake cabin, framed by pines, smoke curling from the chimney. "I want to go there with you, Grandpa," she said. "Just us." So we did. We drove out one Friday, the road bending through hills and trees until the water gleamed ahead. The cabin was just as Ruth and I had left it, sturdy and quiet, waiting. Sophie unpacked sandwiches she'd made herself, and we sat on the porch, watching the ripples chase each other across the lake. For a while, neither of us spoke. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke, and the silence was the kind that heals instead of hurts. "You know," Sophie said finally, "I used to think family meant whoever you were stuck with. But now I think it's whoever shows up for you. Whoever stays." I looked at her, my granddaughter, the one who had stood by me when everyone else saw only dollar signs. "Then I guess we're each other's family," I said. She smiled, and for a moment, I saw Ruth in her, not in the features, but in the warmth. That night, as I lay in the cabin bed, the sound of water lapping against the shore outside, I realized something. I had spent years fighting to keep a family that didn't want me, bleeding myself dry to buy their love. And all along, the one person worth keeping had been right there. The anger I'd carried, the bitterness, began to ease. Not gone, scars never go away, but softened by the knowledge that I hadn't lost everything. In fact, I'd gained something truer. Tranquility, I learned, isn't the absence of pain. It's the presence of peace. And as Sophie laughed on the porch the next morning, her sketchbook open on her lap, I knew that peace was finally mine.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to the story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help support the creation of more stories like this. Have a great day or evening.